Hey everyone, before this episode begins, I want to let you know that I just started a brand new Secret Sonics Discord server. So if you want to join the community, head on over there. There'll be a link in the show notes. Go check it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 117 with Nicholas Lorenzo. This is Nicholas's returning episode on the podcast, and we had a great chat. As usual, my second conversations with people are quite different than my first conversations, and we talked about so many things, including making YouTube videos, content in general. We talked about his podcast, After Mastering. We talked about building a community within the audio space, flipping ideas on their head, knowing when to set boundaries with artists versus serving them and going above and beyond. We talked about just not being afraid to go for it. If you have a crazy idea, just do it. And one last special treat in this episode is that we go break down the mastering of last week's Sauce segment, which was the production and mix of this Mega Flower song. And this week we talk about what went into actually mastering that song. So it's all in here this week of Secret Sonics. So with all that to say, here's my conversation with Nicholas Lorenzo here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Nicholas Lorenzo. Nick is a mastering engineer based out of Melbourne, Australia, and the owner of Panorama Mastering. Nick first appeared on Secret Sonics back in June of 2020 on episode 52, and I thought it was due time to bring him back on for another chat, which he's graciously agreed to do so. With all that to say, welcome back to Secret Sonics, Nick.
Hey, mate. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat shop and all the stuff we love.
We already half schmoozed an episode before we did the intro or whatever. Lots of changes in your life. You know, you're a dad again. Life is crazy. You were telling me that you're kind of slowing things down. I'm curious as to what you've decided to kind of pull back from the schedule, because you're one of these guys I see on the internet, and I'm just like, wow, how does he do this much? He does so much.
Yeah, but I just got selective about because my days are 3:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. typically, and they still are. But what it was what I was filling it out with. I just got more selective about the things that directly contribute to making me happy, I guess. So not just the mastering sessions and mixing sessions that I have blocked out throughout the day, but in terms of being selective about what business and admin tasks I'm focusing on more than others, rather than just being super granular and saying I've got to do, 15 different little tasks and, maybe 10 of them are pretty not pleasant and I'm wasting time on because it's a bit mundane. I just sort of batch that onto another day, and I just focus majority of my time Monday to Friday on things that I really enjoy and get joy out of, at the moment, writing scripts for YouTube and doing research into new technology and reading AES papers and things that just to help enrich my time in the studio, rather than, as I said, doing mundane stuff, which, it's not nice spending 12 hours and half of them are just hustle and grinding and batting your head against a wall.
Yeah. Have you been able to systematize any of that stuff to kind of take some of it off of your plate, or you're just not worrying about it as much, or
I'm just not worrying about it as much. I'm just sort of letting it take a back seat. Maybe batching it onto a Friday or when I have some free time on the weekend, but I'm not making it a high priority list or item during the week, because, as I said, I want to focus on the shit that makes me happy throughout the day, and it keeps me more productive and moving from task to task more fluently.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel, because, I think since our previous episode, you've just done a ton of videos, and they're always interesting and slightly different topics than you've seen other people talking about. I guess, how do you come up with your video ideas, and how do you implement them so easily and so quickly? Because there's so many of them.
So it's been a really long evolution, the YouTube channel, because I've been doing it for a while and not a lot has picked up. Some has, some hasn't. And I think that's been a good learning lesson, because I think if anything picked up too early, I wouldn't have had the sort of grit to be thinking outside of the box. And now I'm at a point where I'm focused on creating videos which aren't just videos in the sense that, hey, today we're going to talk about how to mix a pop vocal. Let's mix a pop vocal, because there's tens of thousands of it. What I'm doing now is I'm focusing on the things that I'm intrinsically interested in. Like, so at the start of the year, what I did was I wrote a list of all the mastering techniques which I know about, but I wanted to explore in depth and really flesh out my knowledge in. Because when you're doing it in a session, you're acting intuitively, the way you set up your compressor, the way you set up an EQ, you're acting with your intuition and things and have learnt and sort of developed on your own terms. But when you have to articulate that in a video, it's very different, because either you can be very blanket statement and say do X, Y, Z and put it out in a video like everybody else does, or I can take the time to question myself and my own techniques and try and get really granular, try and get into that mindset of questioning myself as well, so I can develop my own skills alongside doing the videos. So I made a list of a bunch of techniques and processes I do, as well as a bunch of plugins which I haven't used before, so to get into them a little bit. And then I just started researching really deeply and planning out my videos. So I just spend time throughout the week putting together ideas and course scripts and research and resources and pulling them all together. And it's actually, the videos are a result of a process of me questioning myself and interrogating myself and my own processes, and then it turns out into a video, which is usually not what is out there. I think I did a pretty not provocative, but I sort of provocatively titled, "If your mastering engineer do not provide these, they're not doing their job." That's a video I did.
Right, I saw that one, yeah.
And again, that was stemmed from something Bob Katz posted on in a forum, and it made me question the way I was delivering stuff. Not that I was doing anything wrong, but it just reframed it. So then I had to adapt that mentality and look at, like, how am I delivering my files to my clients? Why, when, how, and then articulate that in a video, because that hasn't really been done. And that to me is a good process. Like, regardless of whether a video takes off or not, I'm getting something out of the process for myself personally on my own level. So that's nice.
Yeah, I love that. With my podcast, it's funny you said that. Like, it's like whatever piques your curiosity or something that you're trying to grow in or whatever. Like, for me, like, the questions I ask are just genuinely things I'm interested in. And if I'm interested in it, I bet other people are also, right? Like, the same way, like, I in a sense, I'm my ideal, audience member, right? Because I'm just asking what I would want to hear if I was listening to a production podcast. So it's just like, great, And also I learn from my own content also, because I go through every episode as I'm editing it, and I just kind of like write down like these like timestamps of like something interesting that the guest said. And I kind of, as I go back, I'm like, I'm repeating what the lesson was, and then I'll kind of make my little content out of it, and that'll kind of be like the little highlight clips that I share are often like the lessons that I took away from the episode, and it's just like, okay, really ingraining that lesson in myself almost,
Yeah, that's cool. I do find that as well. Yeah, because I do the After Mastering podcast, and
right, I wanted to ask you about that as well. Yeah.
I drop markers because I only edit it in Final Cut. I actually don't drop the audio into Pro Tools or anything, because I like to have a lot of the video content as well. So I'm just dropping markers as I go to recut it up, and you find gems, and it's really interesting because you do take that time away from the conversation to reprocess that information. It's really interesting learning process, actually, putting together a podcast or putting any content together. I think if you're taking the contents, like a lot of people think, because I think, especially for listeners of this podcast, content generation is a high friction point. It's like, how do I generate content that is attractive to my audience, helps me propel my business, propel me into the world of, not into the world of, but maybe into people's vision, like into people's, like what people can see on the internet, like other artists can see you, other producers can see you, like how do you create that sort of content? But the process of making the content is really important as well. So rather than just thinking about, I want to get something that gets clicks and likes, it's a good learning experience to really interrogate your own and question yourself as to what is valuable, what is true, what actually holds water. Because when you start writing words to a post, or you start putting a video together, or you start listening back, like I've done this where I've listened to myself back on a podcast, and I'm like, did I really say that? That sounds so stupid. So it's a good learning process for anybody, I think, just the idea of content generation. So if you can make it an exercise where you can develop from it outside of just getting 10 likes on Instagram, it's a good thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and I feel like following the likes is such a bad way to look at your content, because if you're you know what I mean, like something could have 20 likes on Instagram and could have a massive impact on a few people, and like you just won't even know. It's like, I just think first of all, it's a lagging indicator, right? It's the likes on like a social media platform, and it's just like you're waiting for that, you know, that hit of what's the word? Dopamine, right? The dopamine hit from, you know, somebody like clicking like, and it actually has very little to do with the quality of the content and, you know, its potential impact, I think, on the audience. So it's like, don't even look at that stuff. You know, I mean, obviously I follow downloads on my podcast and I look at Instagram, but like, that's really not the place to draw your conclusions from.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's interesting you say that, because I feel like, I don't know, I put out a lot of content and I know people are watching it. Like, insights show that there is an audience there, but I always feel like, regardless of the likes or whatnot, who really gives a shit about it? But then every now and then, you know, somebody will hit me up in the DMs, or I'll get an email, or I'll connect with somebody via a mutual connection, and they'll be like, oh, I watch your YouTube channel, or I watch this, or I connected with this. And I'm like, oh, wow, you know, I never would have thought that it actually had some form of an impact or connection with others. I don't know why. Maybe it's that imposter syndrome. I'm not sure how to frame that, but it's just it always surprises me when somebody's like, oh yeah, I watched that video. I'm like, oh really? Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that there's like a group of people that are going to be listening to this, you know, and it's just like, what? You know, but you just keep doing it. You put one foot in front of the other, and hopefully enough stuff resonates with enough people that it helps, you know, not only does it help you, but it helps them, and, you know, it's mutually beneficial. Yeah. So tell me a bit about your podcast after mastering. I know the idea is to, like, what happens with the master afterwards, and like promotion, and, you know, getting it out in the world and trying to make a big impact as possible with that music. So I guess tell the audience a little bit more about the podcast and what it's about, and what, you know, what was the impetus to starting it?
Yeah. So the podcast is exactly that. Everything that happens after mastering and before the release, or even post-release, how people plan that out. And the reason why I did that is because I'm always thinking, how can I create the biggest impact for my clients? I love my work as a mastering engineer, and I'm really good at that. And that's just a humble brag, but I'm like, I'm really good at the job I do, and that's great for my clients. But at the end of the day, they're handed over a product, and how can they use that? So I was reading Steve Jobs and when they're setting up the Apple stores, yeah. And so when they're setting up the Apple stores, they got you know how they got the photography sessions where they do the example of how to use the Macs with the photos, or use Macs with Logic Pro, or they've got those demonstrations about real case uses in the store of people using the products. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what about real case uses of people using my product, my like what I give them back in mastering? So the idea was, you know, to showcase what happens, like when people take a product from my studio, how that's used in the real world. And the reason why I was really excited about the idea, and I still am excited, I've actually finished filming season 2, is because there's no alternate motive to the podcast. It's purely to show those stories, those use cases. I'm not a PR firm. I don't do PR. I'm not trying to sell a service package or a blog package or anything. It's just purely unadulterated. These are people. These are their stories. This is how they release it. This is how they use my product after mastering. And that's it.
Nice. Yeah, it's amazing, because it's I feel like, you know, people talk about, you know, when you're trying to do like a service like what we do, like whether it's mixing or mastering, you know, if you're giving something beyond the mix or beyond the master that really helps the artists that you're working with like succeed, that's like you know, an intangible, to quote Daniel Grimmett, it's an intangible that's like helping, you know, increase the value of what you're providing. And so like just giving an extra bit of like, hey, this is how you can actually have more success with your release, And also I talked to Carl about this as well, in the previous episode. He's like all about helping his artists promote their music, promoting their artists he works with music after they're like while they're releasing, pushing the images and just like, hey, I'm part of the team. Like, let's do this together. Let's push this as far and as wide as possible. And I feel like that I think that's a great way to like retain the artists also, to keep coming back and being like, yeah, like Nick gave me a great master and he helped me like